Okay, folks, coming up in 2 minutes' time, or I don't know, maybe 3, but no more than that. Do, 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 do. Piers, do you know how this is deceptively tranquil music before a mad show? If you are watching an archive version, fast forward 2 minutes. Yeah, going out on YouTube and on Facebook. Subject to Clegg. Copyright free music. Facebook. And on wakeupuk.net. God bless you. Piers, mate, I'll tell you, that is an awesome shot of you with the alien Lisa. That is so cool, mate. You've got to keep that angle. Keep that angle. You'll see what I mean in a sec, folks. This thing's got a minute and a half to go, and if I leave it running, we're late. But Piers, shall I? What do you reckon?
What? Do what you like, mate.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave it running. Rodders is always late. Have you noticed this? Slack. I'm calling the Viscount. Hold on. Oh, blimey. That means I'm... Oh, no. Oh, I just ran out of music. Hold on a sec. Oh, there we go. Do that. What's that? Killer cat. Copyright free, Cleggy. Rodders, I think about it a moment. Coming round the gas, mate. Because I never knew it was my imagination. Oh, no, that was for the guests. No, not for you. Anyway, when you're ready, no worries. When you're ready, I'm going to kick off. God bless you, mate. I've emailed you the link. All right. Lovely. All right. Ciao. absolutely bloody useless. Right, hold on, for goodness sake. Oh no, hold on. Is that it? There you go, that's it. Oh, hey folks. Good evening, good people. And welcome to the Daily Chaos. The show ain't daily, but the chaos is. Ordo ab KO. Know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, Piers is here. Piers!
Hi, hey.
God bless you, mate. Rodri is on the way. Mr. Phillips. The Viscount, you know. And I don't know if old Davy Russell's popping in later, but he did want to, and I want him to. So if he is, do. Right. Garnham.
Yeah.
Oh, mate. So tell us give us a close up on the Mona Lisa behind you.
Oh my God. I don't know if I can. I don't know if this will zoom up, but there we go. There she is.
That's an adaptation of the Mona Lisa. It's not Theresa May or something.
No, it is. Yeah, it's a sort of my version of the Mona Lisa.
It is.
Painted
He did that.
Years.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's awesome. And you'll have to give us a tour, maybe later or another time. Definitely, I think your artwork.
It showcased my artwork before.
We haven't done it. We haven't done it properly. Even if we did, we should do it again. He is a superb artist, as our Piers, and yeah, as well as an actor. Yeah,
it's pretty sick.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's very, very good. Yeah. Right, so, blimey, quite a week. Bugbear, yeah, Bugbear. That's the show this week. And because we got a bug and we got a bear market. Actually, any idea what the markets are? We just got old Rodder's popped in. He's probably aware of it because, I don't know, unlike Piers and me, he's probably got a bunch of shares. Rodders, have you been keeping track of the markets? Has it been complete meltdown, or is there some semblance of?
The answer is we had a chat about this last week. And by the way, I am growing out a beard. As I'm going through my booze treatment, the doctor said, look, do something which is totemistic. And I thought, I'll grow a beard. I've never had a beard before. And when I'm through the detox period, I'll shave it off and then, frame it on the wall. So that's the reason for looking slightly disheveled. And in actual fact, the way the beard is growing out, I've got this sort of Mexicano-looking dark moustache. You do. With a bit of grey around either side. So it's not working. You're
full half Chilean. Quota.
Yeah, full half Chilean. Exactly. So, coming to the market, funny enough, I think equities, I agree with Piers, are fundamentally the major indices are overvalued. But what you've got to bear in mind is that in terms of yield, if you look at the stocks that have performed very well, they have a good and solid dividend yield. So if you look at companies like Philip Morris, British American Tobacco, some of the drug companies, and if the alternative is getting a 0.5% yield on government bonds, and you have a requirement for income, that's going to push up the value of equities. What you will find that if there was a sharp and sudden rise in interest rates, that is what would destroy the market and effectively cause a major correction. But until till such time, and the common thinking is that low interest rates are here with us for some time to come.
Yeah, that's right.
We've never truly recovered from 2007, 2008. That was a regulatory disaster.
That's right. That's right. Look, I'll just give it a very, very brief roundup of what's going on. I think we have officially gone into what they call a bear market today by the looks of it, because the Dow, it's down at its close 5.86%. NASDAQ down 4.7%. S&P down 4.89%. FTSE went down after all by only 1.4 today. CAC 40. But anyway, basically, it's these kind of figures. I mean, the Dow was disastrous. It lost all of its gains from yesterday, having on Monday lost about 9%, 8.7%, something like that. Incredible. And basically, that is 20% in 2 weeks. 20%. That is trillions. Just gone, wiped off the global markets in a couple of weeks. Now, people are maybe thinking to themselves, so what? It's just a bunch of rich people who've lost some money. But it's also jobs and potentially pensions and all sorts of things, all sorts of ramifications. So I want to get into a bit of that tonight. But Olly, as Piers was pointing out, and I want to pull Piers in to ask him about this. This is it not, just a correction to date? Now, maybe we will see coronavirus really show its toll on the markets off the back of this. Piers?
That certainly seems to be the thinking of certain people that I choose to read and follow online. Yeah, I mean they're talking about. I mean, it does seem that. I mean, my impression is that the markets have run themselves very thin. They've been quantitatively easing. The central banks have been buying up their own debt. They've been bailing out corporations, buying up their debt. Interest rates will remain suppressed at near zero because they can't even afford to pay off the debt on the debt, the interest on the debt that they've issued. So it's sort of, the whole thing has become a bit of a farce.
Big old Ponzi, no? Big old Ponzi. What? I mean, how did it not crash before? Has it ever? Maybe Rodders, you can tell us, what did they do enough off the back of 2008 to rectify this Ponzi scheme, or was this inevitable anyway? And coronavirus, if you like, made the markets sneeze. And this was going to be inevitable at some stage. That quantitative easing was a joke. And now interest rates, there's no movement, basically. There certainly isn't now, because they pretty much reduced them as much as they could. So there's no cushion at all now.
Well, Piers, if you want to go first, read 2007, 2008. I've got particular views in respect to how that should have been handled.
Yeah, no, I at the end of the day, the situation was, as we all know, that RBS bought ABN AMRO. They didn't do their due diligence with the purchase. ABN's books were there was full of toxic debt. RBS basically overstretched themselves and ended up.
Well, it was Lehman. It was Lehman Brothers went down, wasn't it? That triggered the dominoes.
Well, actually, it was prior to that, Ollie. I think the issue that you had Bear Stearns. You had this toxic mortgage market, and the problem you've got is that the banks were making a lot of money, advisory fees and issuance fees, on the back of asset-backed securities. And when liquidity dries up, the regulators insist that you mark your book to market. And to use a simplified example, if you gave Her Majesty a loan of 100 million against Buckingham Palace as a first mortgage, and for whatever reason, no one wants to buy into that particular mortgage, it doesn't mean that Buckingham Palace is worth less than 100 million. But because the liquidity is not there to trade that type of debt, you've got to say, well, it's worth 10 million. So you've got these immediate write-downs on balance sheet. And that's where the regulators should have stepped in and introduced emergency measures.
They were basically dishing out mortgages to people that couldn't afford to pay the mortgage payments.
Well,
that's what was happening.
Hang on, Olly. In actual fact, I'm sorry. This is a slight misnomer.
Right.
If you look at corporate default rates and default rates on mortgages, in actual fact, they were lower than the recession in the late 1980s. Is the reality when you had the big issuance of junk bonds, etc. So if you look at the underlying fundamentals, the default rates were lower, but it was a different type of debt. And okay, you had the toxic mortgages. I don't know whether you saw the film The Big Short, which is a fantastic.
Margin Call. Saw Margin Call. That was very good.
Oh, Margin. Well, that's another one. That had that. Who was in that?
Stanley Tucci and Demi Moore. And again, Jeremy Irons was brilliant. He was superb in that.
Jeremy Irons. And who was the guy who played? But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, the regulators did not step up to the mark in an intelligent way.
The credit agencies, that were saying that junk was AAA classed or something, and then the whole thing went tits up. And they, for example, were lending loads of money to Greece and places like that. That just
let's get into the nitty gritty of why the global economy crashed.
My question, gentlemen, is: Did they? Okay, let me go back a wee bit. Yeah, one of the things that seems to have changed the financial markets and made it so dangerous for people. Two things. First of all, taking currencies off gold or silver, I suppose, but basically that was making it fiat currency. Yeah. But this has been a long time coming. We're making money basically valueless, paper worth paper. One, and two was all the deregulation, which maybe is best summed up with what Bill Clinton did by getting rid of the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated Main Street. Hold on, whoa, just a sec, Piers. Which separated Main Street from Wall Street. In other words, you put your savings in your bank, and it couldn't be gambled by these yuppies on Wall Street until they got rid of this Glass-Steagall Act, which did protect Main Street, and all of a sudden, and then that's why the likes of RBS had problems. Am I wrong? And the question, after you explain that, please, and then we will move on, is: have they, off the back of 2008, have they provided the kind of safeguards required so that people can keep their jobs and their savings? Piers, please.
No, they haven't. I mean, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. That was why the government bailed RBS and other banks out, because the investment side of the banking, was tied in with they were basically using people's current account money and investing in the stock exchange. So the problem they had was that if they allowed RBS to fail, then ultimately they would have probably done what they did in Cyprus, which was a bail-in where they would have taken people's life savings in order to
an EU diktat.
Yeah, but they couldn't have done that because there would have been riots up and down the country because people would accept having their.
Well, they did do it. The EU said we're going to have a bail-in. In other words, everybody that's got money in the bank, we're taking it to bail out.
It was the Germans, to be frank, who were the ones who proposed it and put their foot down because they would.
It was the EU, and then they said the finance minister of the EU said this is a template. He retracted that. He retracted that statement the day after he made it. Nonetheless, he made it, and they also said in the States they agreed it was a template. We haven't had bail-ins since then. Yeah. But anyway, Rodders, what's your take?
But you can't allow that in a major European country. I mean, Cyprus is a relatively small place. Yes, there's a lot. It's a tax haven. Yes, a lot of very wealthy and powerful and influential people had money in the millions.
Russian.
The Cypriot government gave the Russian millionaires sort of the heads up prior to the bail-in happening, so that none of them got kneecapped or shot in the back of the head. But I mean, as I've told you before, I personally know the son of the ex Greek ambassador to London, who had and his father had life savings in a Cypriot bank and got wind that something was going to go down in Cyprus, and he went to the bank in person. They pulled the guy out of retirement that he used to deal with on a regular basis to reassure him that his money was safe in this Cypriot bank, and then 3 weeks later they cleaned him out. So this is, if they're prepared to do, this is what they did in Cyprus. But Cyprus is Cyprus. That's a relatively.
Olly, you raised a historical point, which is the Glass-Steagall Act, and if you, it's a very important change in our in financial and banking history. The Glass-Steagall Act was put in place to separate risk-taking institutions that were issuing bonds, doing IPOs, using their balance sheet, and earning
basically playing roulette.
Do you know what? Yeah, because the bankers earn big deal fees, etc., and it was to separate and sterilize that part of the business from the deposit-taking banks, which is your and I. When we have our money,
regular people,
it's our cash. Regular
a few
people,
quid in the
they
bank,
pay their wages into a building society or a commercial bank, and by the repealing, and it was in Big Bang, which was 1984 in the UK, it coincided with the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which effectively enabled big banks to use their balance sheets using depositors' money, i.e. ordinary people's wages, who never expected their wages to be gambled on mortgage-backed securities or IPOs or derivatives.
Yeah.
And that's what led, by the way, to a huge change in the financial markets. And I remember it distinctly because my father was a partner.
That's when it started going mad. Silly money.
My father was a partner in a stockbroking firm that was sold to Citigroup for about $1 billion. It was called Scrimgeour Kemp G, which then became Scrimgeour Vickers, which you might remember, Piers.
Mm.
And basically, in my father's day, to be a member of the London Stock Exchange, you had unlimited liability. And what that meant is you were very careful with how you used your balance sheet because your family house was on the line if you made a bad decision. Now,
You're a bit like being a name in Lloyd's.
Yeah. Do you know what? And my father, funny enough, I mean, a number of his partners were also became names in Lloyd's. And my father always refused because he said, I can't have two sets of unlimited liability.
Yeah.
And the point being, as soon as you start employing some whiz kid out of Cambridge who's on a salary, who has no personal stake in the business other than a big salary and the potential for enormous bonuses, effectively, they're gambling with other people's money on fantastic, new and marvellous financial instruments. And if it works out well, at the end of the year, they get $1 million, 2 million, 3, 5 million quid worth of bonuses. If it all goes tits up, they just get made redundant, but they don't lose their flat in Chelsea or their house in Belgravia. And that is where I think the corporate culture in financial services has gone horribly wrong. And actually, it ended up with 2007, 2008, a bad set of regulators. And let's face it, where did the regulators come from? If you're a regulator, you're not the top of your game. Because if you're sensible in the financial markets, you're going to earn more than the 100 grand that a regulator earns. I mean, let's face it.
Okay.
Actually,
Go on, Piers,
FSA,
go on.
as it was, it's
The FSA. What's that?
It's
Financial
actually
Services
paid for and sponsored by the very banks it's supposed to regulate. I mean, the whole thing's a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
Hold on, Piers. Sorry, please repeat that.
Well, the FSA, the Financial Services Authority, which became the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, is essentially paid for and sponsored by the very institutions it's supposed to regulate.
Well, like the Press Complaints Commission, actually, it's putting paedophiles in charge of the playground.
Yes, exactly. It's the same principle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and do you know what the other thing I find extraordinary is the proliferation of these journalists who opine, let's call it the male money or money mail. You've got these journalists who, in actual fact, instead of reporting the facts as they generally do in the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, you've got this new breed of financial journalist who comes up with predictions. Interest rates are going down, so this is what's going to happen to the economy. And it's like, well, you know what, mate? You're probably on fit. I mean, Ollie, you tell me what a financial journalist earns: 50 or 60 grand a year?
Probably more.
Okay. I would imagine a lot more than that. I would imagine a lot more than that. When I was at Bloomberg, a lot of them were probably on that pretty much, and that was 15 to 20 years ago. I bet a lot of them are on a good whacking six-figure salary.
If you're a senior financial journalist at the FT or the Times or the Telegraph or something, then you're going to be on well over 100K a year.
Okay. I mean, the point being is, if they were any good at their jobs at forecasting money market movements based on macro or micro events, they'd be running their own hedge funds, earning 7 or 8 figures. So you've got these mini people who all of a sudden there's a change in interest rates. They say this is what's going to happen. This is going to implode. That's going to implode, which does cause market panic with retail investors, which is an area of the market that has grown significantly. And if they were any good, they would keep their bloody mouths shut and would be running their own hedge funds. So the nature of financial reporting has fundamentally changed. Again, the Glass-Steagall Act, I thought, was it was a watershed in respect of risk management.
Yes, but have they not repaired? Okay, so the FCA, or whatever, the regulator in the UK, Piers is saying, is basically crap. In the States, is it any better in the States? Or has there been any proper reform since 2008? Or is it basically as dodgy and full of self-serving snakes as it was back then?
It's a publicly reported fact that Goldman Sachs, and if I get the number wrong, Piers, if you'd pick me up on it, Goldman Sachs, I think, paid out $4.5 billion to avoid any litigation from the
I can't confirm the amount. However, you're absolutely right. What the banks factor into their working model now is fines. So the FCA in the UK or whatever
SEC in America.
Yeah, exactly. In the States, they'll issue fines because of bad business practice, but it won't stop the banks from carrying out the bad business practice. They factor in the cost of the fines compared to their profit margins,
and the
cost
of doing business
never as significant as the profit. So they just write the fines off as a running cost.
But Goldman Sachs, interestingly, that settlement for me was astonishing, and from memory, it was about $4.5 billion that insulated them from any litigation from the SEC going forward, and also any criminal investigation for insider trading. When you make a book, as you know, Piers, you can shift markets depending on which way you make the book.
Yeah,
and you can front run other people's books, which is what happened with Bear Stearns, if you recall, prior to the collapse of Bear Stearns. The cost was $1 billion.
Algorithms these days. I mean, it's almost now it's the length of the wire that connects you to the exchange. The millisecond difference that you have advantageously in the length of the the line between you and the exchange in order to let your algo do the trade for you. I mean,
there's nothing wrong with that in principle, and what it does, in my view, is it irons out inefficiencies in the marketplace. And if you earn a couple of bits on a daily basis, even though you're leveraged, if you invest in a hedge fund, you know what you're buying into. If we take Lehman Brothers, when Lehman Brothers went tits up, it was guesstimated that they were trading at 33 times their tier 1 capital. Now,
okay, hold on. Whoa. Now we're getting into stuff that is just going to bore me silly. What I want to know is, what is the impact of this going to be? Now, hold on. Let me just read a story. And when I've read that story, in relation to this story, please give me your answer, gentlemen, on what you think is going to happen to the markets, and then we can talk a little bit more about how that's going to affect Joe Bloggs and John Doe. Now, according to the WUUK magazine, coronavirus is 10 times more lethal than the seasonal flu. Trump's task force immunologist says. Now, this guy, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is becoming a household name just in the last couple of days. He's the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, telling lawmakers during a House Oversight Committee hearing today that COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus, is probably about 10 times more lethal than is the seasonal flu. President Trump has often compared COVID-19 to the flu, as have we all, because it is a strain of the flu, which affects tens of thousands of Americans each year in an effort to calm people down. But Fauci clearly wasn't trying to downplay the seriousness of the virus's spread. Fauci is a member of the White House's coronavirus task force. At the same time, he did clarify that 10 times figure actually brings the new coronavirus fatality rate lower than official estimates, which hover around 3%. The flu has a mortality rate of about 0.1%. So when considering the likelihood that there are many asymptomatic or very mild cases that have gone undiagnosed, Fauci places the new coronavirus lethality rate at somewhere around 1%. While that's a good deal, lower than the current data suggests, it would lead to significant numbers of fatalities and makes the flu comparisons seem pretty questionable. Now, we could go on with story after story about this. Apparently, the WHO have just classified this thing as a pandemic today. I thought they did last week, actually, but apparently they've just done that today. They're the only people that seem to have not realised it was a pandemic. I don't know what the hell the WHO's been doing, actually, frankly. They're still letting people travel, non-essential international travel. Seems nuts from China, South Korea. I'm not going to rant. But the question is, gentlemen, there is clearly a big problem here. The markets are spooked. It appears to me that all we've had is a correction on the nonsense from this quantitative easing, i.e. printing money out of nowhere that's been going on since 2008, and that's just had a 20% correction on the markets. Are we now going to see some kind of total crash? And off the back of that, are we going to have some serious hardship to the extent that, for example, it's going to be very, very difficult for the British government to honour that budget that was rolled out today, which was a pretty impressive budget in terms of trying to tackle coronavirus, £30 billion towards that fight, it has to be said. What is going to happen now, given what the likes of Fauci are saying, which a lot of people would say is, well, he reckons hovering around 1% mortality. The figures actually out of Italy, for example, so far are showing far worse than that. Maybe you'd like to start us off, Rodders.
Well, I think on a segmental analysis, and I always come back to this, is that the majority of the deaths are amongst men, unfortunately. So it's a sexist virus. Bastard.
Very sexist.
Yeah. And most of the people who've died have comorbidity, i.e. they suffer from something else.
Yes. And
what we've seen in Italy, where there's been an example, in one day, I think they reported 168 deaths.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you've got large communities, as you do in Spain, of people, who are over the age of 60. So, I mean, you can imagine when this virus hits, a gated community in Florida made up of pensioners. Basically, they'll be wiped out. There'll be lots of cheap real estate. Well, they're the most at risk. Coming back to the economic issue that you raised earlier and the budget, what you found is that the government is funding this splurge on spending by reducing interest rates by 0.5%. Now, the government, the PSBR, is reported on an annual basis. They don't capitalise.
What's the PSBR?
The public sector borrowing requirement.
Right.
And if you reduce
so
the
what's
interest
that?
rate, it's the amount that the public sector, the government, borrows from capital markets, the public, pension funds, etc.
Right, because basically this 30 billion, they're borrowing it, aren't they? They haven't got it. They're borrowing it.
Absolutely not. It'll come out of the budget deficit. But when you consider we're sitting on 1 point, and correct me, Piers, I think public sector debt's about 1.7 trillion at the moment.
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know what
it is.
It's about that. So if you take 0.5% off the interest rate, actually it enables the government to spend more. But coming back to the issue that this raises, bonds versus equity, and I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. The issue that companies will have, given the way that pension funds are structured in the UK, is it means there'll be a massive, an even bigger pension fund deficit in company pension funds. Now, typically what will then happen is that these pension funds will move into equities. So it's a self-policing measure. And for people to go, well, to think that there'll be a market crash that will take us 50% off the FTSE 100 actually doesn't make sense. The coronavirus has raised some questions as to productivity in the short term, with people self-isolating, staying at home and not turning up to work. I think that's a temporary blip. And my view is a rush to cash everything in and say the world's going to hell in a hand cart is lunacy, because pensioners still need income from their investment portfolios. Companies still have the legal obligation to provide end of salary pensions, etc., etc. And
we're looking at entire industries being devastated here. I know it's not entirely to do with coronavirus, but we saw oil drop by, nearly 30%, 29%, and it actually ended up the day on dropping 20% oil the other day. That's because of a spat, a price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. But nonetheless, it happened. It provoked the 8% drop at the Dow on Monday, for example. And it hasn't exactly been a great start to the week. We just a sec, Roger. We've got, for example, problems with the China supply line, which is going to affect a whole bunch of industries. We've got the entire shipping industry in various different sectors affected by this. We've got air travel. We've got Boeing is already screwed, for example, with various problems. We have got enormous industries affected here. Can the market basically, I don't know. I think the concern that people should have, it seems to me, is that their supply line company, their job in a supply line company, some company that is assisting, I don't know, maybe the automobile industry, something like that, is affected, goes bust, and they lose their job. How much of a risk is that now, or do people not have to worry because of, for example, the kind of measures that Rishi Sunak has put into place today with the budget?
Do you know what? But basically, when it comes to fundamentals, and you pick on an industry by industry basis, you'll find that shares in some companies that provide, example, loo paper have gone up.
They'll do well. They're probably better off buying a bog roll than a bunch of £5 notes at this rate.
Well, don't forget, I think it was Sir James Goldsmith who in 1973 said all you're going to need for this recession is a bar of gold and a case of Heinz baked beans.
I thought you were going to say whiskey. Okay. Yes. Okay. So, but there is this concern. Okay. All right. So you can't be sure. Piers, what's your take on it?
I like a good conspiracy theory. And I'll hit you with one that's being banded around.
George Soros has shorted the market.
No. There is this idea that there's a large cyclical thing that happens on Earth, but the distance in time is so great that obviously we forget about it over the millennia, but apparently it's woven in. It's sort of every sort of 25,000 years the sun belches. It sort of lets out a coronal mass ejection, and the powers that be have known about this for a while. So they've been basically allowing pollution and plastic geddon and all the rest of it, the cutting down of the rainforests, general environmental destruction, and they've allowed the stock markets to be completely abused, but pumping trillions into the system because they know that they only have to keep the whole thing propped up for a finite amount of time prior to this thing happening, and that what they've done is they've used a lot of the funny money that's been generated out of creating this enormous bubble of debt to create sort of infrastructure that they believe will enable them to ride out said event, and that after said event, the issues that they've created firsthand with the markets will no longer exist anyway, and that they don't know how severe this event will be, but they're contingency wise they've been preparing for the worst case scenario.
Sorry, Piers, who has created this event and for what purpose?
Nobody's created this event. It's just a natural event that occurs, but it's on a very long.
Unless it came out of that lab, unless it was released on purpose, we don't know.
If you give me a chance, I'll explain.
Sorry,
I think what's happened is that they thought they don't know the exact window of time that this coronal mass ejection from the sun will occur. So they know it's going to be soon, but they don't know exactly when. And so they've been propping up the financial markets, hoping that the event would occur. So everybody would be prepossessed with that and not worrying about what, the market's tanking. The fact is that the event hasn't occurred. It's still due. And they're no longer capable of propping up the markets. So they've released this bug in order to, and created a sort of pandemic, and they're using their corporate media to up the fear and create this sort of mass hysteria in the general public in order to justify the inevitability of the markets crashing. So they've got plausible deniability.
Okay.
Go on, Rodders.
I was going to say the conspiracy thing only goes so far.
It does. However, I do believe that there are good guys who have created a sort of an alternate. They've got contingency plans in place, and I do believe that we might be in a position where there will be a horrendous kind of stock market readjustment, which could potentially wipe out a lot of. I thought, Piers, but I also believe that there will be some sort of financial debt jubilee where everybody's personal debt will be written off, whether it's mortgages or credit card debt or whatever.
Piers, I thought you were going to come out with a different conspiracy theory. Actually, I thought that you were going to say something along the lines of what Ben Fulford. Don't know if any of you know this guy. I don't know whether the guy's for real or not, to be honest with you. I've got no idea. Everything he says to me sounds very far-fetched. But he's been saying this week, this Ben Fulford guy, who reckons he's a white hat and not a plant or whatever, that this has been orchestrated as a man-made virus, been released, accidentally on purpose sort of thing, that as a cover to bring in a kind of soft martial law, which is effectively what Italy is in now, for example.
Yeah,
and
sure.
China's been in.
They're apparently going to do
Hold
the
on,
same
let me
thing
finish.
as-
Let me finish.
Yeah.
So that, and because I want your opinion on this, so that
Okay.
Trump and the white hats assuming they are, because again, I don't know,
No.
have the chance with everybody at home, tucked up and all the rest of it, to go after and arrest these deep state merchants that have been holding back our humanity. And that this whole virus thing is a cover for that. Now, I want Rodder's opinion on this, but first of all, Piers, I thought that was the conspiracy theory that you were
But
going to
it
give us,
is, but it isn't. I mean, like, that there are two camps of conspiracy theory, that are going on. But yeah, I do believe that we're on the cusp of major financial change. And I think the coronavirus is being used as an excuse, plausible deniability for the general collapse of the global economy. But I do believe they have contingency plans in place, and part of that will involve a massive write-down that will, not necessarily put the kibosh on everybody's personal finance.
Piers, that argument is unsustainable. First and foremost, if we come back to every century, there is a plague. If we take the Black Plague, Black Death, bubonic plague, it wasn't the leaders of Europe who designed the rats to run around and release this on society, and it worked. It wiped out 30% of Europe. Funny enough, an Italian friend of mine who lives in Monaco, he didn't want to go back to Italy, having survived the Italian flu of 1967, which in actual fact was not widely reported, but killed an awful lot of people. You got the Spanish flu that killed 60. The guesstimates vary between certainly a minimum of 60 million and 90 million. Was that developed between the years 1918 and 1920 by Germany after they lost the First World War? The answer is you can come up with whichever conspiracy you like, but every century has a wipeout disease. And the notion that I'm always fascinated to know who they are. We talk about the Bilderberg
Richard
group.
Branson. I got no idea.
Lock him up for a start. The point being is that economies are naturally competitive, and when we talk about a massive write-down, don't forget that what you're suggesting in that is a complete readjustment of living standards, because if you have an aging population rather in the UK, Germany, as we do across Western Europe, what are you going to say to the pensioners? Actually, when you used to be able to afford, a 3-course dinner or lunch. Now you can only afford, a bag of noodles. That ain't.
No. It's all tied in with a release of suppressed technology as well that would allow us to sort of generate energy, environmentally friendly energy that doesn't pollute in a perpetual way without the need for power stations.
We get that, but this is part of the point about the release of or the ability for oil prices to fall despite reduced production. We've got shale oil, we've got shale gas, predominantly in America, which is now for the very first time self-sufficient. It has the ability to tell OPEC to fuck off. It's
a family show.
Sorry. They had the ability to say, look, Foxtrot Oscar. They didn't have the ability, rather, until now.
But Rodders, they've got battleships in the US naval fleet now that run on seawater. I mean, look it up. The technology is real.
That's right. They do. They've got amazing.
They've got the capacity to create vehicles now that run on water. They can split the molecules into hydrogen and oxygen and then run a vehicle, by the splitting of they can split water into its base.
They have a US warship which runs on seawater. It's true.
We do not need petroleum. We don't need nuclear. We don't need any of these things any longer. The technology exists to supplant all this, and I firmly believe that.
Actually, let me just cut in there. Yeah. The amount of energy that is required to build a wind turbine, in actual fact, is huge. So the technology to
And
build these
they're not biodegradable either. Those turbines
I'm
are not
in favour of,
biodegradable.
I'm not in favour of wind turbines. I'm in favour of them actually giving us what they've got, so we can actually autonomously produce energy. There's no reason for houses to be on on some sort of grid. That
I agree. I agree.
To be able to
Solar
generate
energy. I'm a huge fan of solar and also tidal energy, which is perpetual. But the point is, we are many years away, in actual fact, from being able to distribute it.
I don't believe that's the case. I believe that there's been a huge amount of suppressed technology that they've deliberately withheld because they wanted to keep the oil-based economy alive and therefore themselves in power and
Makes
in
you wonder.
the money. I think we are on the cusp of a major renaissance in the way we choose to conduct ourselves financially and in terms of our general daily lives, in terms of the way we generate energy, produce food, and educate ourselves. I think we are at a turning point now where you talk about the natural disasters occur, viruses and pandemics occur on a reasonably regular basis every century or so. But now we're at a different juncture. I believe that we have been visited. I believe in aliens. I believe that our governments have interacted with off-worlders. They have shared in technology. They've suppressed that technology. That needs to come out, and we all need to be able to take advantage of that. And I know that sounds crazy, but actually, when you
wearing your Star Trek shirt, by the way.
No. I mean, there are serious people that believe in this stuff. Paul Hellyer, the ex.
It does look like a Star Trek shirt.
And even Armstrong himself made a speech on the 25th anniversary of the moon landing, saying that there's a huge amount to be learned when truth's protective layers are removed. Which is a very sort of loaded, ambiguous statement to make. And I mean, people like Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, firmly believed in all this. There's a long list. There was the 2001 press club in Washington D.C. Where they invited 40 military people who swore affidavits that and gave their testimonies talking about working in black ops programs. This stuff's real. It's not fake. I mean, I've watched hours and hours of testimony of people delivering very detailed testimony. There's no break in their continuity. They're not bullshitting. These people are real. They're not. In my mind, they're real.
Some of them are. Some of them are. And this is half the problem. It's so difficult to know who to trust and who not to trust. And anyway, look, I want to read some comments and then we will continue with this because Piers, I want to go down that rabbit hole. And I heard Rodders wants to come back and probably he's going to tell us that he's a lizard or something. So look, Karen Frost, US is going to pop off to Mars. Why? Helen Smith. Sorry, Ollie, I'm only allowed so many lines per post. This is on YouTube, yeah. Well, I'll be working tomorrow night, so I'll continue barrier nursing like others do in the isolation unit and ICU, etc. I'm gathering all, and then she gets cut off. Helen, God bless you. She is on the front line there. Not for the first time. God bless you, Helen. Karen Frost, the petrodollar rules the world. Carol Weston, we're all adults. We can handle swearing. Carol, no, we can't. The Americans can't. They're all Presbyterian. Helen Smith also says any person with weak immunity will have a more acute reaction, which can strike anyone at any time. I just go back to basics and we deal with it. A high temperature is a sign of infection. Stav Woodcutter. Good evening, Stav. God bless you, mate. Time for sound money. Fiat always goes back to zero. This time will be no different. Not matter what anyone says. Karen Frost, they know that they have but a short time. Retro Gamer 71 says mass ejection, talking about the sun. LMFAO, laughing my bottom all over the floor. And yes, says also this is a cynical movement, this Ponzi financial thing. Carol Weston, I've heard the Bradbury pound could pull us out of the financial poop, although I don't know anything about it. And I want to take some comments also from Facebook while I'm about it. David Laddie says, the French have been out on the streets all the time. And the numbers are nowhere near the numbers in Italy. Well, I've got no idea why that is, David, but I'll tell you what I do know is that whole thing going on in France in meltdown is another classic example of why we cannot trust what the media, anything they say, because not so much about what they do or do not say, but what they do not say, and not telling us the severity of what's going on in France, the streets in France, and people getting shot by the police in France or by special ops or whatever. Just goes to show how crap, how untruthful and deceitful is the mainstream media. Well, Alison Tarver, hold on. I'm going to get... Whoa. Hold that thought, sir. We're getting some of our community comments in here. Alison Tarver says, funny how people in different countries have been out in thousands demonstrating. Then this virus appears to get them off the streets against demonstrations, against their governments. Now they're in shutdown. And Hong Kong is another good example, for example. Amanda Thompson, send a massive pack, Ollie. She's talking about bog roll, by the way, because I just tried to bribe everybody by saying, please share this show and I will send you bog roll. Share this show and I will send you a bog roll. I was lying. But anyway, thanks, Amanda. Send a massive pack, Ollie. My imagination is running wild now. I'm seeing SWAT teams turning up with the postman. God knows where we're going. David Laddie says plenty of sightings and rectal probes, referring to aliens. And Stephen Tannis-Pullen says, if all aliens are like E.T., they can come visit me. Sue Dacey, been watching Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan today. Fascinating. Think the technology is all there for so much, but kept from us. And Amanda Rolfson says, no, they are not. Eric used to work, that's her hubby, that's Amanda's hubby, used to work for a wind turbine company. He knows. They're not what, Amanda? I think that she basically disagrees with me and Piers and reckons they're better from the sound of it. Sarah Boland, our pensions are a joke. £7,000 a year for the UK and £27,000 a year in Germany. It makes you wonder which country was on the winning side of each world war. It certainly does. Right, Rodders, you wanted to come back.
German.
Go on, Piers.
Germans. I mean, this is what I mean about deep state. You know, the Germans basically took over. They had they were the ones that were digging in the desert for the ancient technology. They found it. They reverse engineered it. Then they got sort of noticed by people from elsewhere who then interacted with them. Then they got involved with them. Then they started to work in cahoots with them. That's where all these black ops, started to be built out. All the German scientists moved to the States under paperclip. Werner von Braun was the sort of public NASA.
Set up NASA.
The German thing is
we don't know what technology, alien technology, the Nazis uncovered.
That QC, I heard Michael Mansfield interviewed about this, and he was saying, the whole thing is run by the Germans.
Not Mike Mansfield. You're thinking of the other guy, the other chap. Anyway.
Guys, can we move slightly further away from sci-fi?
I don't know. Why do you disagree? Why do you disagree? What proof do you have to disagree, Rodders?
Well, I don't have any contrary evidence, but I don't have any evidence that demonstrates that ET actually, and as lovely as a film it was, we've been fascinated. I mean, funny enough, my grandfather, who was a major league lunatic, he wrote quite a lot of his pension was covered by his sci-fi books, some of which I believe are still in print.
It is a very interesting theory. People do wonder what's the truth of Area 51, for example.
Do you know what? Each their own. But if we look at the loo roll epidemic, where they're flying off the shelves, there's been quite a lot of comedy on Facebook. 50 quid, and I'll let you know which department of Tesco still has loo roll. And my basic response to all this stuff, so I get a lot of messages, is, well, in actual fact, there's plenty at Waitrose, here in London. But failing that, we're using the next door neighbour's cat, which is extra soft. And,
Lovely.
and there you go. Coming back to pensions and Germany, very specific point. One of the reasons that Germany was able to accelerate itself post the Second World War is we gave them the bloody money at rates of return that we couldn't compete with, rebuilding our own industries.
That's right. Whilst we were still paying off our debt with the United States, which we only paid off about 5 years ago.
2000. It was March 2007. And the point being, when it comes to quantitative easing, it's not the first time it's happened. Following the Treaty of Versailles, you had the hyperinflation in Germany, where it was cheaper to paper your walls with Deutsche Mark than it was to actually buy wallpaper.
Yeah.
And if you look, you got the same in modern Zimbabwe now. The reality is that post-Second World War, to avoid an encroachment by the Soviet Union, we gave cheap loans to Germany, which we could ill afford, so that they could invest in the latest production technology for cars, machine tools, etc., etc., etc. So effectively, their economic success is down to our generosity. And what's happened? It's come back to bite us in the bottom.
Yeah, it has.
They're still running the fucking show.
And that's down to our apathy. The French have always sucked up to the they sucked up to anyone with a bit of cash. Ask any Parisian prostitute. Sorry, isn't it funny? You jump into a taxi in Paris and they don't speak English, and as soon as you wave a €100 note, they speak bloody Shakespearean English. They can recite Chaucer. That's just the nature of the frog. But we handed it to them on a plate. And the beauty is now, post-Brexit, we've taken control back. And also coming back to pensions, the way that pensions are organised in the UK is that companies pay in a segregated fund on behalf of the employee. In Germany, a percentage of your turnover goes into a state fund. So actually, the state is responsible. It's a taxpayer-funded pension, unlike the UK. I mean, the basic pension in the UK is taxpayer-funded, which is why it's so low. But in Germany, a percentage of your turnover, because I used to do it when I had my 2 German companies, employing 3,000 crowds. And if there is a company failure, by the way, let's take the UK, BHS. Well, now we have the pension regulator that will step in with some kind of bailout, which is a fraction of what the final salary pension is worth. In Germany, you get your full pension entitlement. It's a different system. But again, how has Germany become so competitive? Well, first of all, a bit like the Chinese, they take a longer-term view on returns on capital, unlike the City of London. And I've got to say, Piers, I'm afraid it's down to some of the people you used to work with or for, who in actual fact expect 20% IRRs on an annual basis because that's what their bonus is dependent on. If you can survive on real returns of 2.5–3% above inflation, guess what? That's capital available to industry to build factories that have a long-term future.
Yeah, you're right. I have a hedge fund friend who is setting up his own outfit, and the amount of due diligence and research he does into his investment portfolio is extraordinary, and he's looking at long-term investment strategy. At the kind of rates of the
is that true, Piers? That disparity of the pensions. Is that true? That disparity of the pension payments? What, $7,000 in the UK and $27,000 in Germany?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. I can tell you that for fact because I had 3,000 employees, German employees, that I employed directly, and I owned 100% of the companies. And that's.
Hold on. What was that whole thing about a united Europe when you have a disparity like that? The EU has just sucked their Treasure Island. They used to call the UK Treasure Island, didn't they?
getting pensions. I mean, it's the way they structure their taxable income and how they, you pay into a pension pot as an employer. You're paying, I mean, you don't employ independent pension schemes. I mean, a lot of companies do. My company do. They use an independent pension scheme that we some of our salary goes into on a monthly basis. It's structured differently. That you're personally liable for the pensions of the people that work for you.
Not personally liable. The way it works,
not liable, but you're paying into. You're paying. You're not using a separate business. Or maybe I'm getting it wrong. I don't know.
No. Piers, the way it works in Germany is that, in actual fact, the pension liability becomes a liability on a company balance sheet, which the company is responsible for on a predetermined basis. So you accrue the pension fund. If the company fails for whatever reason, it then falls on the German state, into which you've already paid a percentage of your turnover to guarantee the pension that the company has offered to the workers.
Right.
So BMW, you retire from BMW. On the balance sheet, you will see there's a pension liability, and it comes out of the current earnings of the company. I mean, not to get too boring about accounting detail, but that's how it works. If the company fails, it then falls on the state, and there's a German national pension fund which guarantees the rate of pension that you were guaranteed by the company you used to work for.
We pay national insurance, which is what our £7,000's based on.
Yeah, and the national insurance is pissed away because in actual fact, it doesn't go into a segregated fund. I've always had a problem with national insurance. It's meant to pay for the NHS. It's meant to pay for pensions, national insurance, and it's not. It's used by the government. So imagine if you were doing current accounting for a UK business, and you said, "Oh yeah, part of our turnover is going into this, which is tax free," and you're using it for something else, you'd be done for fraud.
Yeah, precisely. It's exactly the same as what the banks are doing with Glass-Steagall.
Yeah. Do you know what? Take depositors' money as a commercial bank and using it to gamble to line the pockets of blokes who live in Belgravia and Chelsea, basically, with zero risk to themselves. No personal liability, not like in my father's day, where if a bet went wrong and your stockbroking firm went tits up, you gave up your bloody house.
That's right. I know. I have. My father was a name in Lloyd's. Thankfully, he had his money in safe syndicates. But I know several family members who are also names of Lloyd's, and for many years it generated them a handsome income. But when the shit hit the fan, some of them lost almost their entire wealth. So
the LMX spiral and Lloyd's effectively, even today, can be viewed as an unregulated investment banking system.
Right.
What do they do with the premium income before they distribute it? They gamble it in investments. And fun enough, one of the greatest success stories on that model is Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway, that actually started off life as an as an insurance company. And he worked out that if he could invest the money more wisely than his competitors, in actual fact, he effectively had created for himself an investment trust where any surplus to liabilities for in insurance claims could be distributed to the shareholders. I'm now going to start getting very boring. So
you are. You're getting boring again. Right.
Sorry.
But at the end of the day, what we're basically saying is, that there's too much liability placed on us. They are basically bleeding us dry. They're taxing us, betting the tax income, as they see fit. And it's not always going to be a winner, and quite often hasn't been.
If you take this H2 project, why on God's earth
the big train thing?
30 minutes of travel time so that people in Birmingham can come down to London. It's outrageous. I would pay to spend 100 billion to add an hour and a half to stop this movement of people, which actually is not good for our economy. This notion, in actual fact, that mobility of the workforce is useful to an economy, I think is absolutely ludicrous. What you want to do is you want to keep Northerners up north. You know, they can come down on holiday to.
Yeah, that's right. Keep them north of the Watford Gap. All that.
Well, keep.
No, but we need to come up with a completely radical, different model of existence where we have region. You know, where regions are sort of autonomous. You know, where they're self-contained. Yeah. Everything they need within the area that people. You know, I mean,
Piers,
we don't need
that's the perfect segue. Because is this crisis, this coronavirus deal, is it not going to show globalization up for the nightmare that it is? Because this coronavirus, we are not equipped to deal with it. Such is globalization, you could argue. For example, we couldn't self-isolate in time to contain this thing. I mean, you would have thought we could have tried, but as it was with globalization, the markets, the money men refused any idea of shutting down international travel. That's quite obvious, no? Is there not a possibility, gentlemen, that what we'll see off the back of this is the death of globalization, at least to the extent that we've seen it? And with Brexit, for example, with Trumpian politics, are we not going to see more emphasis on the nation state and retaining your culture, for example? Could this not be the reset, the trigger for the reset that we need?
I think retaining culture is absolutely imperative. One of the issues is of course Sir Frank Whittle's invention, the modern jet engine, which has made global travel cheap, easy, etc. The mobility of people, and I was only joking about.
But Greta doesn't want that anymore, does she? So, I mean, from the point of view of their, 11-year-old starlet or whatever, that's another reason to cull globalization.
Well, I think the world has experimented with it. This notion of a multicultural society is a complete nonsense because we must preserve our individual cultures. I don't have any problem with multi-ethnicity on the basis that people respect each other's cultures. And do you know what?
And preferably that it's not, politically motivated, democratic engineering, demographic engineering.
But you're talking about the survival of the current financial paradigm, and I think it's about to change. I mean, I think, you've got journalists in the Telegraph and the Times and the FT talking about, the danger of collapse now. Europe can't fiscally bail out itself any longer. You've got the whole of Italy, which is an economy big enough to cause ructions around the world, and you've got everybody in quarantine in Italy right now, which is a very serious situation from a fiscal point of view.
If you also look at population density, which is one of the conversations we had at the end of last week, if you take the British landmass and you take our population at 66 million, and you take the French landmass, they could afford to take up 168 million people to balance it out. So when you look at fiscal obligation from a dense population, we are more balanced, ironically, having a denser population than other competitors in Europe. And that's one of the problems. Quantitative easing didn't work out for Germany post the First World War. It has worked out for America, and it worked out for us. Europe, the EU, were one of the last players to start printing EU banknotes to buy in their respective government debts, and that hasn't worked out. They left it too little, too late. So I think there will have to be an alignment, and I think if you're a fundamental or an economist that goes on fundamentals, you've got to look at supply and demand. How much demand is there in Europe? How is it paid for?
We've got 2 minutes, gentlemen. Have you got enough loo paper? Rodder.
I've got the next door neighbour's cat, ultra soft.
Right. Piers, are you stocked up on loo paper, mate? Can you get loo paper in London?
I went to this. Knowles and I went to the supermarket the other day, and there was actually quite a lot of loo paper, so I wasn't sort of unduly concerned. I did buy one extra big pack of bog paper, but I mean, like, actually, funnily enough, just wandering around London at the moment. We've been out in the West End today. Oxford Street was pretty busy. The tube seemed less busy. We got the tube home at 6:30 this afternoon. The Central Line, which is usually jam-packed, at that kind of time. And actually, it was easy to get on. So, and we went round some shops. We were in Liberties. Knowles used to work in Liberties, and I know a guy who works there now. We went around chatting to some of her previous colleagues, and the guy I know who works in the rug department, selling sort of Persian rugs for 20 grand a pop and stuff.
Right.
And it was quiet. Everybody was saying, all the shops are quiet at the moment. So this has already had a knock-on effect. You can pretty see the number of people walking around with masks increasing. And this is getting into the psychology of the general populace, and it's causing panic. People aren't going out. People are choosing to stay at home. They're not eating out or going shopping as much. They're not using public transport as much. It's already beginning to have a knock-on effect. And if this persists, then it will have a marked impact on the economy itself. And we've already got to see what's happened in Italy now with the general lockdown that's gone on. That if cases or numbers of deaths increase rapidly in the UK, we could end up being in the same situation. We may end up seeing a sort of soldiers on the streets, martial law scenario in this country and elsewhere in Europe and in the States. Which only logic dictates that if we end up in that kind of scenario, then there will be some sort of massive financial reset. There'll have to be, because there won't be any money being generated.
Because just on what you raise a very interesting point.
Rodders, you've got 10 seconds, mate. That's it.
Sorry, Rod.
What about these comments in the media from Ramonas saying, "Thank God that we'll be getting rid of the old people who voted for Brexit"?
That's appalling.
Why aren't they being
Awful.
banged up?
Awful. And they're all on the left, aren't they? The hate being shown from the left. I hope Trump gets it. I hope Nadine Dorries dies. Awful stuff. Like when Rush Limbaugh was diagnosed with lung cancer, and they're saying, "Oh, die, you." It's absolutely disgusting. And it always comes, it seems to me, I'm watching on Twitter, from the left. What is it about the left? Why can they not have some respect for their political opponents? Who cares if you don't share the same political values? You're human beings. No? Unbelievable.
Yeah, I made a joke about Gina Miller. It was very clearly a joke. I got 12 weeks in prison for that. What about these guys are saying, get rid of the old gammon that voted Brexit? It's great.
Right.
Let's clear out society. I think that's far more offensive than anything I've ever published on Facebook.
Yeah, no, but we live in this underlying agenda. You're always saying to me,
hold on.
Well, they are the very people that put you in prison for 12 weeks, Rodders, because the system is geared towards a certain type of philosophy, and the agents in play that put you in the clink for a joke are the ones who work for this, for them, for the deep state. There is I do believe that.
Yeah, and
I want to say, guys, God bless you. I just had, I don't know what went wrong there. Hold on, there you go. That's it. It's that time of the night.
Sorry, we missed that one off.
Hey, Piers.
We're already on going dry already. Yeah, are you going dry?
Not yet. We're still up for a drink before I get the heads up.
I'll text you tomorrow and we'll get something in the diary.
Piers, I look forward to that. Brilliant.
Rodders is quitting the booze. I tell you what, at a time like this, can you believe it? He's quitting the booze. Absolute madman. I want to say a big cheers to Mr. Piers Garnham and Viscount St David's. God bless you both. And also to Nick Clegg for allowing this show to stream on Facebook. Wow! free speech on Facebook. Unbelievable.
Self-isolating.
Fascism is softening. Hey, go on.
It's only because he's self-isolating. If it was in the office, it wouldn't be going out on Facebook.
He's probably sat on the loo. He's probably sat on the loo counting his sheets of bog roll. Go on, Piers. Go on, mate.
Can I leave?
Yeah, you can leave. You can leave. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you so much. And Rodders.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Let's do this again next week.
God bless you, mate. Lovely. Lovely.
That's right. Speak to you soon. Cheers, Ollie. Bye.
God bless you, man. Cheers, Piers. It's always lovely to talk to you on the Wednesday, mate. It was good fun. And I want to say thanks to everybody in the comments. Fantastic comments. Wonderful. I was fiddling with my knobs and I was trying to get something working so that we could have... But it didn't work. I went to the supermarket earlier to do my monthly shop, and there was loo paper, plenty of loo paper on the shelves. That's in Valencia, yeah? If you didn't see it, look at the video I put on YouTube and on Facebook, a couple of posts before this one, showing the chemtrails up in the sky today. Have a look at those videos. If you trust the media, watch that video and then think again. God bless you. Nighty night. I'll catch you later.